They are scared of us leaving on no deal because they think actually the entire European project can start to unravel if we do that and make a success of it. It's very interesting. The opposition to Britain fighting the European elections is not just in Britain, it's here. They don't want us fighting the European elections. They certainly don't want me back here. I don't know. There must be a chance that at the European summit...
Final choice. Nigel Farage rejoices in public after taking over from the Labour Party. In a stunning turn of events, new polling data reveals that the Labour Party is facing a potential electoral disaster. A poll conducted by Think's Insight and Strategy earlier this month has shown results that are nothing short of shocking. According to the poll, a staggering 52% of those who voted Labour in the last general election are now planning to vote for either the Green Party or the Liberal Democrats in the next one. This is a devastating blow for Labour, as it shows that more than half of their previous supporters are now abandoning the party. To put this into perspective, the figures are even worse than they initially appear. While it may seem that Labour could still retain a significant portion of its vote, the reality is much bleaker. Of the remaining 48% of Labour voters, many are now considering other options, including independence, reform, or, in a worst-case scenario, simply deciding not to vote at all. With such a large proportion of their base defecting to other parties, it's becoming increasingly clear that Labour's chances of maintaining its current level of support are slim. In fact, analysts are predicting that if this trend continues, Labour could be lucky to secure even a third of the votes they garnered in the last general election. This dramatic shift in voter behavior has led to projections suggesting that Labour's share of the vote could drop to as low as 10%. If that happens, the party could see its number of seats in Parliament plummet to dangerously low levels, potentially as low as the low teens, or even under 20 seats. With such a significant loss of support, Labour would be left in a perilous position, struggling to maintain any semblance of influence in British politics. But it's not just Labour that's in trouble. The Conservative Party is also facing its own electoral wipeout, with estimates suggesting that they could be left with as few as 8 to 10 seats in the next Parliament. The Tories, much like Labour, are grappling with a sharp decline in voter confidence and support. Both of the UK's major political parties are now staring down the barrel of what could be an unprecedented collapse in the next general election. As the traditional political order crumbles, speculation is growing about what the next government will look like. Many commentators are now suggesting that the next Parliament could see reform emerge as the dominant force, with the Liberal Democrats stepping into the role of official opposition. This would mark a dramatic shift in the UK's political landscape, with the established parties of Labour and the Conservatives being relegated to the sidelines. Even the Green Party is now considered a serious contender, potentially securing third place in this new political order. This dramatic decline in Labour's fortunes has left many political observers stunned. 2/3 of the party's support appears to have evaporated, a blow that will be difficult to recover from in such a short period. The leadership of Keir Starmer, once seen as the party's hope for a recovery, is now coming under increasing scrutiny. The question on many minds is, what went wrong? How did Labour manage to lose so much support, and what can they do to turn the tide before the next election? Some critics point to Starmer's leadership as a key factor in this collapse. His cautious, centrist approach has failed to energize the party's traditional base, particularly the working-class voters who have been the backbone of Labour's electoral success for decades. At the same time, Starmer has struggled to offer a compelling alternative to the ruling Conservative government, and his failure to articulate a clear and inspiring vision for the future has left many voters feeling disillusioned and unmotivated. As a result, they are turning to other parties that promise a fresh approach and a break from the political status quo, Others argue that the party's decline is part of a broader trend in British politics, where voters are increasingly dissatisfied with the traditional political establishment. The rise of populist movements like Reform and the increasing prominence of smaller parties like the Greens and the Lib Dems reflect a growing disillusionment with the two-party system. In this new political landscape, Labour and the Tories are struggling to hold on to their traditional voter bases, while parties offering a more radical or alternative vision are gaining traction. At the moment, it seems as though Labour's decline is inevitable unless they can radically reimagine their platform and leadership. The party is facing a severe crisis, with its core supporters abandoning them in droves. The prospect of an electoral wipeout looms large, and Labour's chances of regaining any kind of dominance in British politics seem increasingly remote. In the current environment, many are calling for the leadership of Keir Starmer to be reconsidered. While some argue that his leadership could eventually turn things around, the overwhelming trend in the polling data suggests that his time at the helm of the party could be coming to an end. As one observer put it, Starmer has played a blinder in overseeing the party's decline and achievement that might not be his fault, but is certainly a result of the direction he has taken. Labour in recent years, the next general election, is shaping up to be one of the most unpredictable in recent memory, with Labour facing the very real possibility of a catastrophic defeat. With a rising tide of smaller parties, many of whom are stealing Labour's traditional base, the old political order is being upended in dramatic fashion. In the wake of the poll results, some are even predicting that the next government will be led by a coalition of Reform, the Lib Dems, and possibly even the Greens, leaving Labour and the Tories as mere footnotes in a new era of British politics. With Labour's electoral prospects looking grim, the party is now facing a stark choice: continue down its current path and risk total electoral obliteration, or find a way to reinvent itself and reconnect with the voters it has lost. But with 2/3 of their support gone, the challenge ahead is monumental. Labour's future is on the line, and how they respond in the coming months will determine whether they can recover or be consigned to the political wilderness. As Labour grapples with these dismal polling results, the sense of urgency within the party is palpable. There is widespread concern about the party's ability to stage a recovery in time for the next general election. The loss of over half of their voter base to parties like the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats is nothing short of a political crisis. The party's traditional stronghold in working-class areas, once considered Labour's fortress, is now eroding at an alarming rate. Keir Starmer, once seen as the savior who could return Labour to power after years of turmoil under Jeremy Corbyn, now finds himself facing intense pressure. His leadership has been under constant scrutiny, especially as the polling data reveals a steady decline in support. Starmer's attempts to move the party towards the centre, positioning Labour as a more moderate alternative to both the Tories and more radical factions within the party, seem to have failed to inspire the voters Labour desperately needs. One of the most significant issues facing Labour is its inability to connect with its traditional working-class supporters. These voters, who have historically been the backbone of Labour's success, have become increasingly disillusioned with the party's direction. Labour's failure to address issues that matter most to these communities, such as stagnant wages, job insecurity, and a lack of affordable housing, has driven many of them into the arms of other parties. The Greens, for instance, have successfully capitalized on the growing concern about climate change, while the Liberal Democrats have positioned themselves as a pro-European, progressive alternative. Even voters who once identified with Labour's core message of social justice and equality seem to be drifting away, looking for something different. The rise of smaller parties like Reform has further complicated matters for Labour. Reform, led by Nigel Farage, is drawing in many former Labour voters who are disillusioned with the current political system and seek an alternative to the status quo. Reform's populist appeal has struck a chord with many who feel that the traditional political parties, including Labour, have failed to address their concerns. Farage's promise to disrupt the political elite and provide an alternative to both the Conservatives and Labour has resonated strongly with disaffected voters, particularly in working-class constituencies that have traditionally supported Labour. As Reform's influence grows, it presents an additional challenge for Labour, who are already struggling to retain their existing voter base. The Conservative Party's own struggles have only added to Labour's woes. With the Tories facing their own electoral meltdown, some observers are predicting that the next general election could lead to a major shift in power, with Reform, the Liberal Democrats, and possibly even the Greens emerging as the dominant forces in British politics. The prospect of a government formed by a coalition of these smaller parties has been gaining traction, as they appeal to a broad spectrum of voters who are dissatisfied with the traditional political establishment, while it may be tempting for some within the Labour Party to point the finger at the Tories and their failings. The reality is that Labour's own internal issues are the root cause of their decline. Starmer's moderate approach, while it may have been intended to appeal to a wider electorate, has failed to energize the base. Labour voters who once saw the party as their natura. For many voters, particularly those on the left, the key issue is trust. Labour's traditional supporters have felt increasingly alienated by the party's leadership under Keir Starmer. His move towards a more centrist, moderate position, while designed to appeal to a broader electorate, has failed to inspire the grassroots base that once powered the party. Starmer's attempts to distance the party from the more radical policies of the Corbyn era may have been a pragmatic move in some respects, but for many in Labour's traditional strongholds, it has felt like a betrayal. The electorate, already disillusioned with the political elite, seems to be searching for something different. The rise of the Reform Party, spearheaded by Nigel Farage, speaks volumes about the mood of the country. Reform has successfully tapped into the frustrations of voters who feel that the two major political parties, Labour and the Tories, have failed to address their concerns. Farage's populist messaging resonates with a growing portion of the electorate, particularly those in working-class constituencies that Labour once dominated. The surge in support for Reform isn't just a reaction against the Conservatives, but also against Labour's inability to connect with the concerns of ordinary voters. Labour's challenge lies in its inability to present a compelling vision for the future. The party has become increasingly trapped in the middle, unable to fully satisfy either the left-wing base that once defined it or the more centrist voters it now seeks to appeal to. This lack of a clear, unifying message has left many voters confused and uncertain about what Labour actually stands for. If the party cannot provide a coherent and inspiring vision, it risks being swallowed up by the growing discontent with the political establishment. Furthermore, the rise of smaller parties has shifted the balance of power in British politics. The Liberal Democrats, once a distant third, are now emerging as a genuine force, particularly in urban areas and among younger voters. With their focus on civil liberties, environmental issues, and social justice, the Lib Dems are offering an alternative to the entrenched political establishment. The Greens, too, have seen their influence grow, driven by increasing concerns about climate change and the need for urgent environmental action. Both of these parties, while still small compared to Labour and the Tories, are positioned to capitalize on the growing sense of frustration with the status quo. This shifting political landscape presents both an opportunity and a challenge for Labour. On one hand, the failure of the Tories to retain support presents an opening for Labour to capitalize on disillusionment with the current government. But on the other hand, the rise of Reform and the Lib Dems means that Labor is no longer the default choice for left-wing and progressive voters. The party now faces stiff competition from parties that are not only appealing to Labor's traditional base, but are also carving out their own distinct political identities. If Labor is to avoid electoral annihilation, it will need to make a bold, decisive move. There are those within the party who believe that a return to more traditional left-wing policies could be the key to winning back the trust of disillusioned voters. Nationalizing key industries, strengthening labor rights, and addressing income inequality could resonate with the working class base Labor has lost. However, such policies could alienate centrist voters who have drifted toward the liberal Democrats. Or reform. The danger for Labor is that any attempt to placate one faction of the party could alienate another, deepening the divisions that already exist within the leadership. Another possibility is that Labor could attempt to reposition itself as the party of moderation and pragmatism, positioning itself as the only viable alternative to the chaos created by the Tories and the populist rise of reform. However, this strategy carries its own risks. Labor's failure to offer a clear, compelling alternative has already resulted in the erosion of voter loyalty. If the party chooses to double down on its centrist stance, it could further alienate the left-wing voters who once saw Labor as their natural home. The internal divisions within the party only add to the sense of crisis. Starmer's leadership has been heavily criticized, particularly by those who feel that he has failed to connect with the grassroots supporters who once powered Labor's electoral success. The left-wing factions within the party, disillusioned with Starmer's centrism, have become increasingly vocal in their dissatisfaction. If Labor cannot find a way to heal these rifts and present a united front, it risks being torn apart by internal infighting, leaving them unable to mount a serious challenge in the next election. The combative response reflected a broader strategy of the government to shift the spotlight onto the SNP's domestic governance, especially in the context of recent challenges to the party's leadership and political standing. But Flynn's speech struck a nerve not just for the political drama it generated, but for the deeper questions it raised about the UK's shifting energy policy, the economic fragility of Scotland's North Sea communities, and Labour's positioning as it eyes a potential return to government. The reference to Labour Party policy was no offhand remark. Flynn's remarks seemed to be targeting Labour's evolving stance on energy policy, particularly its pledge to phase out new oil and gas licenses in the North Sea as part of a broader green energy transition, while Labour has maintained that existing licenses would be respected and that its vision is aimed at securing long-term sustainability. Critics have warned that such policies could cause uncertainty in energy hubs like Aberdeen. The city, long known as the oil and gas capital of Europe, is now at the center of a fierce debate about how quickly the UK can or should move away from fossil fuels. Harbour Energy's announcement of a 25% reduction in its workforce has sent shockwaves through the region, with unions and business leaders expressing concern about the speed of transition and the lack of concrete support for affected workers. In a statement issued shortly after the Commons debate, a spokesperson for Harbour Energy said, "While we remain committed to our operations in the North Sea, the evolving regulatory environment and investment climate has forced us to make difficult decisions. We continue to engage with the government and stakeholders to ensure a managed transition, but immediate support is needed. The job cuts come at a precarious time for the Scottish economy, already reeling from inflationary pressures, declining industrial output, and sluggish investment in key sectors. Aberdeen, in particular, is facing a crisis of identity and viability as oil majors downsize or redirect investments. The SNP has for years called for a just transition, a move to renewable energy that protects workers, retrains employees, and sustains communities. Yet critics argue that rhetoric has not translated into effective policy. The Scottish government, led by First Minister John Swinney, has recently committed to a £500 million energy transition fund aimed at reskilling workers and attracting green energy investment.